the sun was beginning to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement, where a young mother sat clutching her baby tightly to her chest. Her eyes were red-rimmed from tears and exhaustion. The small child she held was crying. Without pause, a sharp wail that pierced through the noise of the city around them. People rushed by, focused on their own lives and destinations. The mother felt every eye deliberately avoiding hers, as if she had become invisible like a ghost in the crowd. Her arms ached from holding the baby for what felt like hours, but she did not dare put him down. The baby's cries were growing louder and more urgent each second. She glanced around, hoping someone might notice and offer help, but the faces were blank or turned away. Her heart pounded with a mix of desperation and shame. She was a stranger in this part of town, a young woman with no money and no place to go. She had missed her bus earlier, and now the one she waited for seemed endlessly delayed. The city was alive with noise, but none of it was kind. The distant honk of cars, the murmur of conversations, the steady tapping of feet, all blended into a deafening background that made the baby's cries seem even sharper. The mother rocked back and forth, gently trying to soothe the child, but nothing worked. The tears she held back began to spill down her cheeks as helplessness took over. She remembered the promises she had made to herself to be strong for her baby, to protect him no matter what, but the weight of the world was crushing her. Thoughts raced to the night before, when she had nowhere safe to sleep and the cold had bitten through her thin jacket. She wondered how she had ended up here on this lonely bus stop with nothing but fear and exhaustion to hold on to. Around her, the people walked briskly. Some glanced her way with flickers of irritation or discomfort. Others looked away quickly, as if afraid to get involved. The mother's chest tightened with a strange mix of anger and sadness. Why was it so hard to ask for help? Why did everyone pretend not to see? She rocked the baby harder and whispered soft words, even though she knew the sound of her voice barely reached through the noise. The baby's tiny fists clenched and unclenched against her blouse, his face scrunched up with tears and red splotches. She kissed his forehead again and again, hoping to transfer some warmth and calm, but it felt like the cold was seeping in deeper. The bus stop bench was rough and cold beneath her fingertips. She hugged herself as if to keep some warmth inside. She closed her eyes for a moment and tried to breathe slowly, but the panic gnawed at her chest. The baby cried on, relentless like a storm that refused to pass. She felt utterly alone, abandoned in the middle of a busy street, surrounded by a sea of strangers who saw her pain but chose to look away. Her mind drifted to memories of better days, when she had a home and friends who cared, when laughter filled rooms and the future was not so uncertain. But those memories felt distant now, like fragments of a dream slipping through her fingers. Still, she held on to the baby with everything she had. No matter how invisible she felt, no matter how much the world ignored them, she was his mother, and she would not give up. Not now, not ever. As the minutes stretched on, she kept rocking and whispering and crying quietly herself, praying that someone would stop, that someone would see them not just as a crying girl and a noisy baby, but as two souls desperately in need of kindness and hope. The baby's cries cut through the noise of the street, sharp and relentless like a piercing alarm, but the people who passed by were indifferent, their faces blank or filled with annoyance. As they hurried on without stopping, the mother glanced up again, her heart sinking deeper into a pit of loneliness. She felt the weight of every gaze that passed without kindness, as if her pain was a burden. They wished to escape. The street around them buzzed with activity, but none of it offered comfort. Some muttered under their breath about the noise. Others crossed the street to avoid walking too close to the mother and her crying child. She watched helplessly as a young man with earbuds in glanced quickly in their direction, then looked away, ignoring the silent plea in her eyes. Her arms ached and the baby's cries seemed to grow more desperate as minutes ticked by. The mother tried to soothe him with gentle rocking, soft words and kisses on his wet cheeks, but nothing worked. The baby's small fists pounded the air as if trying to fight the sadness inside him. He shivered slightly despite the mother's embrace, and the cool evening air was beginning to bite. She could feel the exhaustion pressing down on her like a heavy fog. Her eyes blurred and her breath came in short gasps. The world seemed so loud and cruel tonight, so full of strangers who could not or would not care. She swallowed the lump forming in her throat and wiped at her own tears, knowing that if she let herself cry openly, she might never stop. The people walking by had their own worries, their own struggles. She understood that, but she could not help wondering why no one could spare a moment of compassion. Why did the world seem so cold when she needed it most? She wanted to scream or plead or collapse, but instead she sat frozen, clutching her baby, as if holding on was the only thing keeping her alive. A woman in a business suit passed by briskly, her face set in an expression of impatience. The mother noticed the woman glance at her baby and then quickly look away as if embarrassed. The mother felt a pang of shame, as if she were a mistake or a problem the world wanted to forget. She looked down at her baby's tear-streaked face and wished she could make everything better. Around the bus stop, litter blew in the breeze, swirling like forgotten dreams. The mother hugged her baby closer, feeling a sudden wave of desperation. She wished for a miracle, for someone to see her not as a burden but As a person with a heart breaking in two, she whispered soft promises to her child, promising better days and safety, even though she did not know if those words were true. The baby suddenly hiccuped, and for a brief moment his cries softened into tiny whimpers. The mother's heart clenched with fragile hope. She kissed his forehead again and pressed her cheek against his soft skin, feeling the warmth that was still there despite the cold world outside. But the people kept walking past, some glancing with annoyance, others pretending not to notice. The mother caught the eye of a teenager, but the boy quickly looked away, fiddling with his phone. She sighed quietly and closed her eyes briefly, trying to gather strength for the long night. Ahead, the bus stop was lonely and unforgiving, but she was still there, still holding on to her baby and to hope. Even when the world ignored them, she refused to disappear. She was a mother, and her love was louder than any cry and stronger than any silence. Out of the corner of her eye, the mother noticed movement, something different from the steady blur of feet and faces that had become a pattern around her. A small figure emerged slowly from the alley beside the bus stop, its paws patting softly on the cracked sidewalk. A dog, thin and scruffy, with matted fur and bright amber eyes, came into view, moving not with fear, but with a calm, curious purpose. The mother blinked, unsure if she was imagining it, but the dog kept walking forward, its head tilted slightly as if studying her and the baby. It stopped a few feet away and sat down, tail brushing the ground once, twice. Then it stood again, sniffed the air, and crept closer with careful steps that made no sound. The baby's cries faltered for just a second as the dog reached the edge of the bench and looked up with eyes full of something the mother had not seen all day: recognition and empathy. She stared at the dog, unsure what to do, but something about its presence made her feel strangely seen. The dog sniffed gently near the baby's feet and then sat back again, ears perked and gaze steady. The mother felt her heartbeat slow just a little. The dog did not bark or beg or run away. It simply stayed there, as if it had chosen her for some reason she could not yet understand. The baby whimpered again, a softer sound than before, and turned his teary eyes toward the animal. The dog's tail wagged slowly, and it leaned in closer, resting its chin on the edge of the bench near the baby's legs. The baby let out a tiny surprised breath, then another whimper, and then a silence that made the mother's breath catch in her chest. She looked around, expecting someone to shoo the dog away or scold her for allowing it near her child, but no one was watching. The people had not changed. They were still rushing by, eyes down, shoulders hunched against a world they chose not to see. But something had shifted in her world. In her moment of loneliness, she was not alone anymore. The dog's fur was coarse and dirty, and its ribs showed slightly beneath its coat, but its presence was warm, solid, and somehow kind. The baby stared at it now quietly, eyes wide and hands slowly unclenching from their tight fists. The mother felt an emotion rise up that she had nearly forgotten how to feel, not just relief, but gratitude, the kind that comes from a miracle you never asked for. The dog looked up at her, and their eyes met, and in that simple connection something broke open inside her. The wall of pain and fear and helplessness cracked just enough to let a sliver of light in. She reached out and gently touched the dog's head, its ears twitching at her touch, but it did not move away. It simply stayed beside her and the baby, as if it had nowhere else more important to be. She whispered thank you without thinking, and though the dog could not understand the words, it seemed to understand the feeling. It laid down at her feet, curled into a ball, and closed its eyes as if it had known her all its life. The mother stared at the dog, now curled up at her feet, as if it belonged there, as if this corner of the world, this cold and forgotten bus stop, had somehow become a place of quiet protection. The baby had stopped crying completely, his tiny fingers now reaching curiously toward the still animal below him. The mother brushed the hair from her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the weight in her chest ease just a little. For the first time in hours, she was not holding everything alone. There was no sound from the people passing, no apologies or excuses, but that did not matter anymore, because something about the presence of the dog made everything feel different, like she had been seen not by the world, but by something purer, something that didn't need words or explanations. The dog stirred slightly and shifted its head to watch the baby, the two of them now locked in a kind of silent exchange that the mother could not explain. The baby let out a small sound, a coo that sounded almost like laughter, and the mother smiled, not out of habit or effort, but because for a moment she felt joy again, however small it was. She had not planned to be here today, not like this, lost and waiting at a bus stop with no money and no plan and no one to call. She had made hard choices, harder than she ever expected, and the journey had drained her completely. But right now, under the dim evening sky, with her baby calm and this dog beside her, she felt something returning, strength, or maybe faith. The bus was still nowhere in sight, but she no longer checked the road with desperate eyes. Instead, she watched her baby now gently patting the dog's side, and she felt that something important was happening, something small and real and full of meaning. A man passed by, glanced at the scene, then paused. He looked down at the baby, then at the dog, then at the mother sitting there quietly with tear-stained cheeks and tired eyes, and something in his face shifted. He did not speak. But he gave her a nod, a silent acknowledgement that she was human, that she mattered. She nodded back, barely breathing as the man continued on, but the moment lingered, because it was the first gesture of respect she had received all day, and it had been given not when she was pleading, but when she was simply present. The dog sat up again, stretched its legs, and stood now facing the road, ears alert, as if sensing something the others could not. The mother watched its posture with curiosity, wondering what it saw, what it knew. The baby was now quiet, nestled back into her arms, and watching the dog with fascination. The mother pulled the blanket tighter around him and leaned back slightly, her body aching, but her heart no longer completely empty. The dog stepped closer, placed its paw gently on the edge of the bench, and let out a small whine, soft but clear, as if trying to say something. And the mother, listening closely, felt that maybe it already had. The mother looked at the dog, its paw still resting on the edge of the bench, and she felt something stir deep inside her, a feeling she could not name, but one that wrapped around her like a blanket, not made of fabric, but of presence and warmth. The baby rested quietly against her chest now, his eyes fluttering open and closed, his breathing steady and calm. For the first time in what felt like forever, she whispered softly to the dog, words without meaning, just sounds filled with emotion. And thanks, and maybe something like love. The dog tilted its head as if listening and wagged its tail once before stepping back and sitting again, this time even closer to her feet, as if it had claimed them as its own. A gust of wind passed through the street, and the baby shifted against her skin but did not cry. The mother adjusted the thin blanket over his small body, her movements slow and careful. Her arms ached, her legs were numb from sitting so long, but she stayed still, not wanting to disturb the strange and beautiful peace that had settled around them. Then from across the sidewalk someone stopped, not because of the mother or the baby, but because of the dog. It was a girl, maybe 10 or 11, with a backpack slung over one shoulder and earbuds hanging loose from her collar. She looked at the dog with wide eyes, then at the mother, and finally at the baby. Is that your dog? The girl asked, her voice quiet but curious. The mother shook her head. Not really, she said softly. The girl stepped closer, kneeling down in front of the dog, who responded by licking her hand without hesitation. Is sweet, the girl said, smiling a little, and then her eyes moved back to the mother. Do you need help? The words were simple, but they landed like a stone in the mother's chest. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unsure how to answer, because yes, she needed help more than anything, but she had forgotten what it was like to be asked, and to believe that the offer might be really. Missed the bus, she said finally, and I'm just trying to get home. The girl nodded, then stood up. I'll be right back, she said before walking quickly down the sidewalk, disappearing into the crowd. The mother sat frozen, watching her go, not daring to believe anything would come of it. But minutes later the girl returned, followed by a woman in a red coat who walked with purpose and concern in her eyes. Hi there, the woman said gently. I'm Anna. My daughter said you've been out here for a while, and I wanted to check and see if we could do something. The mother blinked hard, trying not to cry again, and nodded slowly. Anna looked down at the dog, who now stood protectively in front of the bench. And who's this? she asked with a smile. The mother looked at the dog, then at her baby, then back at Anna. I don't know, she said softly, but I think he found us. Anna smiled and reached out her hand, but the dog only blinked and remained still, standing close to the bench as if guarding the mother and baby with silent loyalty. The baby stirred slightly but did not cry. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, then closed again as he sank deeper into rest, safe in the warmth of his mother's arms. The girl stood beside Anna, watching with quiet attention, her eyes still fixed on the dog, as if she too understood that something unusual was happening, something gentle and important in a city that so often forgot to slow down. We live just a few blocks away, Anna said softly. I can make some tea, we have diapers if you need, and food, something warm, maybe just for a little while until the bus comes, or we can help you find another way. The mother hesitated, unsure if she should accept, unsure if it was real, but the ache in her bones and the hollow in her stomach made the decision for her. She nodded slowly and whispered thank you, though her voice nearly broke on the word. Anna gently reached for her arm, helping her stand with the baby still wrapped in her embrace. The girl smiled again, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a chocolate bar, holding it out shyly. For you, she said, and for the baby too later if you want. The mother took it with trembling fingers and offered a quiet smile, her first real one of the day. Small but honest, the dog trotted ahead, leading the way like it had known the direction all along, its tail swaying behind it. With each step they walked through the streets together, the group of strangers now connected by something invisible and strong. People still passed them, people still looked away, but it no longer mattered, because the mother no longer felt alone. At the corner a man stopped and pointed at the dog with a curious expression. That stray follows no one, he said. I see him around every day, but he never walks with people. The mother glanced down at the dog, who now looked back at her as if saying something only she could understand. She reached down and touched its head, and in that moment she felt steady. They reached a small apartment building, warm lights glowing behind curtained windows. Anna unlocked the door and held it open for them. The dog waited At the threshold its paws just inside, as if unsure if it belonged. Come in, Anna said to the mother, then looked at the dog. And you too, if you want the dog. Stepped inside without hesitation. Inside the warmth wrapped around her like an embrace. The air smelled of something cooking, and safety, and second chances. Anna took the baby gently, and held him, while the girl brought a soft blanket, and placed it over the mother's shoulders. You're safe here, Anna said, and the words landed deep inside her. Like seeds finding ground. The dog laid at her feet, and the baby began to smile, and, for the first time in a long time, the mother believed she might be okay. The warmth of the apartment felt like a different world, far from the cold bench and the rushing footsteps and the empty stares that had surrounded her just an hour before. The mother sat on the couch, now wrapped in a clean soft blanket, while the baby lay nestled in her arms, his face calm, his breathing even the chaos of the afternoon replaced by stillness. Anna moved through the small kitchen making tea with practiced hands, and the girl, whose name was Emily, sat on the floor beside the dog, gently brushing the dirt from its tangled fur with an old comb she had found in a drawer. The dog lay still, eyes half closed, tail thumping now and then, as if it too had found peace in this small corner of the world. The mother watched them, her heart still unsure how to process the sudden kindness that had entered her life. Without warning, she had spent so many days building walls inside herself to protect against disappointment, that now, sitting in this quiet place, she felt like a stranger to her own hope. She looked down at the baby, and kissed his forehead, breathing in the scent of his skin, and feeling a sense of gratitude that reached beyond words, beyond the hunger, and the tiredness, and the fear. There was something else now, something soft and strong, that she had nearly forgotten how to feel. Anna returned, and handed her a warm mug, the scent of peppermint rising with the steam. Take your time, Anna said, her voice gentle and sincere. You don't have to tell me anything unless you want to. The mother nodded, her fingers tightening slightly around the cup. She took a sip, and let the warmth settle in her chest before she spoke. I left because it wasn't safe anymore, she said finally, her voice low but steady. He was getting worse, and I couldn't let my baby grow up thinking that was normal. Anna sat beside her and listened without interrupting. I didn't plan it, she continued. I just packed what I could and ran. I've been staying in shelters, sometimes outside, sometimes just walking all night so he could sleep in the stroller without freezing. Emily looked up from the floor, her eyes wide but full of something tender, not pity but respect. You're really brave, she said softly. The mother looked at her and felt tears rise again, not from sadness but from the kindness of those 4 small words. The dog stood suddenly, walked over, and placed its head on her knee, as if to remind her that she was not alone and never had been. Not really. Anna reached out and gently touched her arm. You can stay here tonight, she said, and we'll figure out what comes next tomorrow. There are people I know, shelters that are safer, ones run by women who've been through what you have, will help. The mother swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded again. Thank you, she whispered. Outside the sky darkened, but the room stayed warm and full of quiet light, and the dog, now curled beside the couch, seemed to watch over them all, as if this had been the plan all along. Morning came slowly, the light creeping through the window, soft and golden, wrapping the room in quiet peace. The mother opened her eyes to the sound of her baby breathing gently against her chest, the weight of his tiny body reminding her that she had made it through another night, but this time in a place that felt safe. The dog lay curled at the foot of the couch, its eyes blinking open as if sensing her thoughts. Its tail wagged once slowly, and the mother smiled, reaching down to stroke its head the way one might thank a friend. Without needing words, she sat up, carefully cradling the baby, who now stirred with a tiny yawn, his fingers stretching in the warm morning air. Anna appeared moments later, holding a cup of tea already steeped, her expression calm and welcoming. I made some breakfast, she said, and there are some baby clothes in the bag over there. Emily had some from when she was little, and we thought they might fit. The mother looked at the bag, then at Anna, unsure how to respond to such simple kindness. When she had grown used to being met with silence or avoidance, her throat tightened again, but she nodded gratefully and whispered, thank you. After breakfast they sat together at the small kitchen table. Anna asked a few gentle questions about what the mother might need, how she might want to move forward. The mother spoke slowly but clearly, her voice steadying with each sentence. I want to find a place to stay where we can breathe for a while, she said. I want to get back on my feet. I want him to grow up somewhere safe, somewhere warm. Anna reached across the table and squeezed her hand. We'll help you get there, she said, one step at a time. The baby laughed suddenly, a bright, joyful sound that filled the room and made everyone smile. Emily clapped her hands, and the dog barked once softly as if in agreement. That afternoon Anna drove them to a women's shelter just outside the city, a place run by people who understood what it meant to leave behind pain and choose a new life. The staff welcomed her with gentle words and soft voices and open arms as they unpacked her few belongings. The dog stood by her side, tail swaying, ears alert. One of the staff looked at the dog and asked with a smile, does he belong to you? The mother looked down at him and then back at the woman. I think we belong to each other, she said. Later that night, as the baby slept peacefully in a real crib and the mother lay in a bed with clean sheets and quiet all around, she Whispered a promise into the dark. I will never let us go back. I will never stop moving forward. The dog lifted its head from the floor, looked at her with those familiar amber eyes, and let out a soft sigh before falling back asleep in that quiet room filled with the echoes of a new beginning. The mother finally closed her eyes and rested, not with fear but with faith.